Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy Hollandaise. And welcome back to Fatal Film, a watch-along horror movie video series where I give you guys the movie ahead of time so we can talk full spoilers. And today we are talking about the 1974 Christmas cult classic, Black Christmas. Now, I think Black Christmas does not get enough credit. This is a horror movie in 1974. It predates Halloween, Friday the 13th. Some people kind of consider it one of the first slasher movies. It came out in the same year as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And while it didn't invent a lot of the things that it does, like the POV shot of the killer, the stalker, ringing the phone and just kind of breathing on the other end, it's not the first to do those things. But it is one of the first movies to kind of put all of those tropes into one single film. And it definitely started the trend of basing a slasher horror flick around a holiday or a specific day of the year. I feel like a lot of slasher movies kind of followed that trend afterwards. At this point, pretty much no holiday is safe.
Look, I'm telling you, you have the wrong number. What's your mother and I must go.
So the movie starts off with a POV shot of the killer entering a sorority house. And this is where like 90% of the movie takes place. In the opening shot, and even all throughout the film, I really like the colors that they use. I think it's very well shot. It's very dark, but contrasted by these like very vibrant Christmas lights. It looks cool. So the killer enters the house, hides upstairs, and then calls the house using the house mother's second line upstairs. And these calls that he makes to the girls, they're so vulgar. Like, it starts off with just the breathing and the moaning, but then he eventually starts actually talking, and it is so over the top.
Let me lick it, let me lick your pretty piggy cunt.
Watch your profanity.
God damn! And then we're also introduced to the main cast here. The sorority girls, and they're all pretty distinct. Some notable names here too, such as Olivia Hussey from Romeo and Juliet, and Lois Lane herself, Margot Kidder.
Come right out and say it. You think that I drove her away? If she's dead, you're gonna blame me.
Who plays like this foul-mouthed alcoholic. She really steals a lot of scenes. She's great. And then later we meet the house mother, who is absolutely hilarious. She too is a major alcoholic, but she has booze stashed all throughout the house. I died when she pulled a bottle out of the toilet tank. I gotta admit, this movie was a lot funnier than I was expecting. I caught myself laughing out loud numerous times throughout the film. That is not something I was expecting. Like, fuck this guy.
Could you give me the number at the sorority house? Please.
Fellatio 20880.
So shortly after we get the first call, Claire, who is ironically the virgin character in the film, she's the first to get killed. It's like, what are you doing? Run, lady!
Who is it?
And she gets stored up in the attic, which is where the killer is residing. She's got a plastic bag over her head, which is probably some of the most iconic imagery from the film. Just the idea that she's up there literally in front of the window and visible from the outside, it's pretty disturbing. It's super creepy. And no one actually knows that she's dead, and she's just considered missing at first. We get introduced to her father, who's searching for her, and the rest of the girls, they don't really think much of it. But the sense of dread really starts to creep in and build up gradually. Coupled with the reoccurring phone calls, which get more and more messed up, the girls are eventually faced with the reality that something terrible may have happened to Claire. And it's crazy to me that it isn't until later in the film that connections are eventually made between the phone calls and Claire's disappearance. Like, one of the very first calls that the girls get, he literally ends it with, "I'm gonna kill you." And they're so nonchalant about it.
I'm going to kill you.
Jess, played by Olivia Hussey, is the main character of the film. We learn that she's pregnant and has a fairly deranged ex-boyfriend, Peter. Jess wants to have an abortion, and Peter isn't having it. Or I guess Jess wouldn't be having it. Probably not the best wording, but you know what I mean. And a lot of hints are dropped that Peter is actually the killer, and the audience is definitely inclined to feel this way. And the police also have their suspicions. After bugging the phone, the police overhear a conversation between Jess and Peter.
Do this?
Just don't hurt the baby.
In the final act of the film, the police finally get a trace on the bugged phone, and in classic, dramatic fashion, the call was coming from inside the house. Now look, this idea, you know, that line, the call is coming from inside the house, it's usually attributed to when a stranger calls, but that film came out in 1979, so Black Christmas did it first.
The caller is in the house.
The calls are coming from the house.
Jess!
Jess, get up! And don't go up there.
Once Jess gets the call and has the revelation that the call is indeed coming from inside the house, she then discovers the rest of the girls dead and has a final confrontation with Peter, who she kills in self-defense. The cops finally show up and all of the murders are pinned on Peter. Except, the real killer was still in the attic. All we know about the killer is that his name was Billy. And if you break down and decipher some of his ramblings when he calls in,
I know what you did, Billy! Billy! Billy!
you can piece together that he likely murdered his family, and he had a sister named Agnes. He's got some problems. Usually horror movies like to put their killers front and center, put them on the front cover, make them look super iconic, give them a mask. But Black Christmas doesn't do this. Billy is a complete unknown, and possibly that might be the reason why Black Christmas isn't as popular as it should be. Now, this movie is very light on violence and gore, surprisingly, and even despite taking place in a sorority house, this movie also steers clear of any exploitative nudity and sexuality that a lot of slasher movies are known for. No tricks, just actually really solid filmmaking. I thought this movie was very, very well done. The cinematography from the POV shots, the creepiness and the pacing was very, very well done. The first 10 minutes of this film, I was completely hooked. I was sucked in. It also helps that we had some really strong performances from a really, really solid cast. This movie was directed by Bob Clark, who, funny enough, is more famous for directing another Christmas movie, A Christmas Story. And these two movies, despite both being directed by Bob Clark and both being Christmas films, they could not be more different. But the more I thought about it, the more I kind of, came to the realization that, wait, A Christmas Story, it kind of did have some creepy moments.
Then what's your name, little boy?
The Santa Claus scene from A Christmas Story always scared the shit out of me as a child.
You'll shoot your eye out, kid.
I think it did for a lot of people.
Merry Christmas. Ho, ho, ho.
Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fatal Film. Let me know what you thought about Black Christmas. I actually really enjoyed this movie. I give this an 8 out of 10. And next time we will be watching Hellraiser. We were actually supposed to watch it this time around, but we skipped it because it's Christmas. But we will circle back and we will watch Hellraiser in the next episode of Fatal Film. Thank you guys so much for watching this one. Peace.